Hey guys, my name is Ryan, and we're back again with another Spirit Island video. We're here in the third and final part of the story of my first 6-6 game. For parts 1 and 2, check out the links in the description. When we last left our heroes, Earthquake was finally able to unleash his power. The quake completely destroyed C1, then C7 and C8 went from nearly lost conditions to effectively barren. River was able to completely clear their bottom track and has already deleted a full land in A8. Ocean has been keeping tabs on the coast and is now fully prepared to drown both E2 and E4. But all of this could not be possible without Many Minds, who's been all over the board and back again, putting out fires from top to bottom. During the last Ravage, we took a gamble, but we missed out on getting one Defend from an event and 2 fear cards, so we did go Blighted. Slow Dissolution of Will makes the spirits turn a presence into their selected token every turn, and it doesn't have too many Blight on the card, so we're facing some loss pressure in multiple directions. One last important reminder, Bargains of Coursing Path was played in C3 in A1, so those lands will teleport stuff across the board whenever anything is added or moved there. The board is definitely looking better than it has been, but can we close this game out? Let's see how it goes. Here we are at the start of turn 5. Everyone is on Reclaim this turn and gains a card. Remember that the Dance's Reclaim gives you the choice between adding a presence or gaining a major without forgetting. So we will be gaining 4 new cards. We already have a plan to clear C2 fast, and so with that, 6 of the 12 coastal lands are completely empty. Ocean taking even more cards to solve the coast does not make sense, since that job has been accomplished. So Nature's Connection is the easy pick here. It's a great insurance policy to make sure that no one goes without their thresholds. Call to Isolation for River is simply a beautiful pickup. As with all other similar effects used this game, the existence of Ocean makes push powers OP. There's enough Dahan mobility with this team too, such that Call to Isolation can be reliably used where it is needed. This pickup is almost completely off element for River, and that's why it's so important to hit 5 card plays. It gives you a little more flexibility, so on top of playing your 4 core cards to hit massive flooding, you can play that flex card whenever something truly exciting shows up. Having Nature's Connection available now makes the choice of majors for Flo and Sully particularly interesting. Sometimes you take a major just because it's possible to threshold, even if it's not necessarily the best card. Most thresholded majors are better than any other unthresholded major, so there's tons of great options to consider. The first thing we can do to narrow the options, though, is to eliminate the all too expensive Fragments of Yesteryear and Draw Towards a Consuming Void. Both are big, splashy, fun effects, but it's just too expensive and requires conceding too much activity for them to be viable. Dances Up Earthquakes has 3 compelling choices here with Accelerated Rot, Melt Earth, and Thickets. All of these cards are terrain restricted, so a good first line of consideration is asking yourself, where would you even bother using this card? Doing a quick glance on the board, we can see that there are lots of inland wetlands, which means that any one of these cards would be able to solve a lot of our primary problems, so that doesn't seem to do too much. The next thing to consider is which ones are easiest to threshold, since if you're going to take a card, you might as well get full value from it. Accelerated Rot can be thresholded with a combination of fairly expensive powers in the form of Exaltation plus Gift plus Nature's Resilience. Obviously, since Rot can be thresholded, then so too can Thickets. Now, Melt Earth on the other hand is a completely different story. There's not enough water in hand to threshold it at all, so we would already have to consume Nature's Connection. And then the Moon and the Earth is actually quite awkward as well. The 2 cards that Dances as Forgotten were 2 of the Moon Earth cards from his starting hand, so the only thing we have left is Radiating Tremors and Bargains. But if we're going to play Bargains, then we definitely want to threshold that, and then we find ourselves with too many awkward elemental issues since we'd now be short on the air. So let's eliminate Melt Earth, and it comes down to Rot versus Thickets. These cards are extremely similar to each other, which makes the analysis much easier. For the price of 1 energy, we get 1 fear and 5 more damage. That 5 damage is the real kicker here, and that's what's going to put this card over the edge. Since we have all these slow to fast cards, the speed difference doesn't really matter. But if we didn't have that, then Thickets would be the better play if we were on the cusp of losing, since it is fast blight removal. But right now we have 12 blight on the card, so it's better to go for the massive raw power instead of the smaller, more desperation play. Now, what card is Many Minds going to pick? Well, they have Jungle Hungers, Wounded Wilds, and Angry Bears, and all of those are attacking cards which execute in slightly different ways. So going through that same kind of analysis, where would we actually use the card? Well, Many Minds mobility means that we basically have no targeting restrictions. Even though we're not in any jungles right now, it's trivial to get there. Also, since we're facing down a jungles build, we probably are going to go to the jungles anyways. There's plenty of blight on the board, so Wounded Wilds will get value basically anywhere. And then Angry Bears is a range 0 card, but it triggers itself for the extra damage when you have a beast, and our presence is beasts, so it just, triggers off of itself. So now let's consider the thresholds. We have no plant cards at all, so the only way to maximize value from Jungle Hungers or Wounded Wilds would be to receive Nature's Connection. Angry Bears is much easier to threshold since it's on element, and Pursue is even a double element card. I think the big hang-up with this major decision was one of reputation. Jungle Hungers is famous for being one of the best mages in the game. It's literally infinite damage. Meanwhile, Angry Bears is known to be a bad major. It doesn't do a ton of damage, and there's actually no spirit for which it's a natural fit. The existing fire animal spirits don't produce any beasts. Taking a look at the board though, the only spot where a Jungle Hungers can do more damage than Angry Bears is up here in E8. Everywhere else, Jungle Hungers is equal or worse. Even if we use push powers to make a land where Jungle Hungers is dramatically better, the animal element that comes with Angry Bears sets up our innate, so that was ultimately the pick. We forget Talons of Lightning here, especially after paying 4 energy for last turn's event. There's just no way we're going to be able to play Talons again. So now that those picks are set, let's see what cards we're going to play for the turn. So starting off with Dances, we have Rumblings is going to come in off of Impend. And then we have 3 card plays. One of them has to be impended, plus our normal 2. We're going to take all 3 of those card plays, and it's going to be impended 3 times. I haven't been tracking the energy for the spirits this game, but just note that before this play happens, or like after gaining energy and all that, Dances is at 5 energy and spends all of it in order to push Exaltation all the way up to 5, so it'll come into play next turn. Ocean is on a reclaim turn, so that means they have to pull presence back into the ocean, and they do so from all of the 3s. Then get to play 4 cards, and so we play Call of the Deeps, Grasping Tide, Tidal Boon, and Swallow the Land Dwellers. Okay, River is on 5 card plays, and so elects to play all of this, so we can hit the Massive Flooding and also use that Call to Isolation. And then Many Minds moves as 1, gets to play 4 cards, and so plays Sky Stretches, Boon of Swarming Bedevilment, Guide the Way, and Pursue with Scratches, Pecks, and Stings. Let's actually move some pieces before the 10-minute mark. Ocean uses Call of the Deeps in the F Ocean, pulling in an Explorer from F1 and 3, and then using Grasping Tide to defend F1 for 4. Dances slides a presence from C7 to C4, and then uses Rumbling Earthquakes in C3. This adds a Quake token, which then gets warped over to E6. Then the other part of the card actually lets you push the Dahan, and they all come over here to C4. And then the Innate gets used to add a Defend 3. And the other part of the Innate lets you add a Quake token, so that once again gets added to the portal and gets shipped over to E6. Many Minds and River start slinging support back and forth to each other. So River sends 4 energy over to Many Minds with this Boon of Vigor. And in return, Many Minds sends over a Sky Stretches and a Boon of Swarming Bedevilment over here. So during the Spirit phase, River did use the travel to send a Dahan over here to F4 by sending a Dahan in and out and then bouncing it over. And then uses that Boon of Swarming Bedevilment to use a Presence movement, sliding here from A2 over here to the 1, and then bounces that guy up here to the 7. Call to Isolation cleans up these towns via the portal. And then River gets to make use of both parts of Sky's Herald by hitting C2 with a Flash Floods, and then using Massive Flooding to kill everything in this land. It's very satisfying to me that the range portion of Sky's Herald matters here. All too often the card is just a worse version of Lightning's Boon, so it's cool to see the card actually used to its full effect. After giving out some support to River and getting paid fairly for it, Many Minds uses Pursue to clean up E1, and then uses Guide the Way to send a Beast and 2 Dahan over to A7. With the full left innate, the teaming host arrives, Flo brings 4 beasts into E4, then pushes 2 of those guys over to E3, and then last, the right innate, Beset and Confound the Invaders, will defend E4 for 4. And this is how things look heading into the Invader phase. So for our event for the turn, we get Map Makers. This is a particularly deadly event in combination with HME6, since you can go from an empty land to a mining land in just a single explore. It's great to finally get another beast event though, and we get value all over the island. Last, we get some free Dahan as well. So overall, I think this event is going to be good for us. Now, we get 4 Fear cards to cash in on too. You may notice we have tons of underdefended or undefended lands across the island, so we're really hoping these Fear cards can put in work. We start off strong with Angry Mobs, tons of free kills all over the board. Next, we get Avoid the Dahan, which this game will provide us plenty of great value. It's worth noting we may be able to suppress the mining booms with this card too. Now we get a spicy one with Plan for Departure. There's a million ways to use this card, and we had a 15-minute discussion of the various ways to execute it, but in the end we pulled both invaders from A6 into A1 and then bounced those into the ocean. And then we pulled an explorer from F5 over to F2, then a town from F6 over into F1. Then last, we pulled Overseas Trade Seems Safer. So we start by ravaging in the mining lands. Then we Scotland 6 and anything that is still a mining land. Then we build in the jungle sands. Now, don't forget that if there is more Dahan than there are buildings, then we don't build because of that fear card. And also, if it is a mining land, then it will ravage instead of build. So, we were originally going to take 13 Blight without the help of fear and event cards. And in the end, we wound up taking just 7 Blight instead. I mean, we could have hoped for more, but thankfully we did survive the turn. So then we have to do a mining boom, and we do so in E4, C5, and F5. Since board A has no explorers, it does not have to mining boom. Then Scotland explores with map makers, and we're off to the slow phase. Once again in the slow phase, Many Minds has no actions. And this turn, Dewey has nothing as well. So River starts by using Wash Away to send A2 away, and then uses River's Bounty to bring in a Dahan and add another one. So Ocean uses Tidal Boons on Many Minds, then uses Pull Beneath the Hungry Earth to kill a town in E1. Many Minds use that Tidal Boon to drown the town out of F1 and send one Dahan over to F3. Ocean then adds a Deeps token in E2 and F2, and then finally gets to do the thing. So we start off over here in E2, do 1 damage per Deeps token, and then now there are at least 3 Deeps tokens and there are no buildings. So E2 becomes a part of the ocean, and all the Dahan and Explorers are drowned. Then we get to push the remaining Deeps tokens. 2 of them have to stay to mark this as an ocean, but then we get to push 2 of them. And so we send them over to E1 and E5. Then we can repeat that power in a land that we have presence, which we happen to have over here in F2. So once again, 1 damage per Deeps token. And then now there is 3 or more, no buildings. So 2 of these guys have to stick around, and then 2 of them get pushed. And we send it off to F3, F4. So why did I elect to send my Deeps tokens into 4 different lands? Doing it this way guarantees that I cannot drown a land next turn. So what gives? Well, I don't value drowning lands too highly in this situation. There's enough activity in the coast that I must deal with, and I don't have the luxury of playing greedy. In addition, if I were to drown a land, which one would I do it to? Remember that after next turn's drowning, it's the coastal lands that will be ravaging. So the only lands that I could drown without increasing the quantity of coastal lands next turn would be E3 and F1. Drowning E3 is safe because we know that the mountains card has already come up for stage 2, so it will not be explored after that. So the issue with these lands is that they're already solved. Many Minds is stationed in both with Dahan, which is exactly what Many Minds wants to do. So what's the point of investing my resources to solve a problem that doesn't exist? The more I play Deeps, the lower I value actually drowning the lands. It's a nice benefit, but drowning lands for its own sake is not a win condition. So with that being said, here's how things look heading into turn 6. As we head into turn 6, we must recognize we're staring down a loss condition here in F8 and over here in E6. So River reclaims, Ocean does G3, and Many Minds pays energy, so we have 3 power gains to consider for the turn. Starting with River, Here There Be Monsters and Shadows of the Burning Forest are generally just worse versions of Wash Away. So the decision is really down to Quicken versus Twilight Fog. Let's take a look at the island. Where would you even use Quicken? Maybe here in F4? Well, we know that Mountains is not the next Invader card, so it's going to be a while before that becomes pertinent. Considering River has to sacrifice a presence every turn, it's just less and less likely that any value will come from Quicken. So Twilight Fog is the pick. Being on element allows for a little bit more flexibility in the card selection, and that's always a nice benefit too. Many Minds gets 4 cards that are all completely off element. The only thing that matters for any of these cards is their text, and we let out some plans in F8 that's going to leave just a city behind, so Favor is the perfect pickup. Last, we have Ocean, who has a bunch of compelling cards. I believe I had about 7 energy this turn, so any of these cards are playable. I'm 3 elements away from being able to threshold unlock, needing air, plant, and animal. Nature's Connection can provide one of them, but we'd still be too short, and without the threshold, this card is probably just too slow. Twisted Flowers is also not possible to threshold due to my lack of air and plant. So now it's down to Ravage Undergrowth versus Sea Monsters. Back when Jagged Earth came out a few years ago, Sea Monsters got reprinted with a nerf to the fear production because it was simply too good on many mines. Well, look, we have many mines in this game, and our wetlands could use some attention, so why was that not the pick? My first line of thinking when using the card was seeing if I could maximize its value with 4 beasts. But if we take a look, there's really no existing targets for that. The biggest land that I could use this on would be here in F7, but Sea Monsters would either have to be repeated in the same land, or Flo would need to send me some beasts so that way I could deal with it in one shot. The only way I could threshold the Sea Monsters would be to use Nature's Connection on myself, and that takes away some other bulk resources from the team. Besides, how bad is just giving up this F7 anyways? Thanks to HME, we don't have to deal with Cascade, so it's just 1 Blight. That's it. If Flo moves his beast here, and he's not going somewhere else, like this E7 that's going to Ravage twice and produce 2 Blight. So, taking 1 Blight versus 2, it doesn't make sense for Flo to put any beasts over there. And as we saw when we were playing out some other things, we need to give out this Nature's Connection to help other people hit their thresholds. So it's actually going to be very difficult for me to threshold Sea Monster this turn. But let's say that I did. I mean, where else would I use it? Because if not here in the 7, then perhaps I could use it to shore up some of these coastal lands. You know, use the repeat in 2 different lands, deal with 2 smaller problems. It certainly gets the job done, but since we're already thinking about smaller problems, maybe we should consider Ravage Undergrowth. Since we're giving out the Nature's Connection, if we give ourselves the single plant, we will be able to threshold this card. So we can guarantee the threshold, and that means that we can use the 2 different wilds that come off the card to push 2 towns from a coastal land into the ocean. And that's another way to deal with a small problem. Since the immediate value of both of these cards feels pretty similar, I elected to take the cheaper card so I could possibly play it again in the future, or hold on to a little more energy to gain and play a different major next turn. This single power pick really put a full stop to the flow of the game, and I feel like I left a lot of the considerations out in that explanation. My power card gain came in at 6:39 p.m. on the 25th, and we didn't make a decision about that until 15 hours later, 9:40 on the 26th. There was well over 100 messages in the discussion channel before starting a side thread, which then also had well over 100 messages in it, and everyone took the time to chime in. That process was very helpful though, since through all of this debate, we played out all the different lines that could possibly happen with this next Explore, with the sands, wetlands, or jungles. We realized that, let's say we assume we get like a neutral event, but very positive fear cards, we should be able to pull a Terror level 3 victory before the next stage 3 card ravages. This line was not dependent on Sea Monsters, so another compounding factor is that Ravage Underground was mildly safer with that blight removal, even though it does have less raw power. So in the end, that's what we take for getting Pull Beneath the Hungry Earth. After finally coming to that decision, Ocean adds a presence to F4 and then slides presence out into F4, making a sacred site, as well as A3, E5, C2. Then we play the full grip. River is on a reclaim loop and is still quite happy with the cards in hand, so they play the same ones again. Manymind finally comes back to the top track and adds a sacred site into A1, which then gets portaled over here into F4. Those 4 card plays that we have is sufficient to play everything. And then last, Earthquake uses Growth 3 for the first time this game. So first, adds a presence over to E6. And then moves the presence in C3 up to 1 space to go 0 spaces. Technically, this means the presence was moved into C3, and it can be teleported anywhere on the island, this time going over to C1. Grow 3 on dances lets you reclaim 1, which is nice, but it also lets you manipulate the energy levels of cards in your impend. So you can add or subtract 1 energy to 2 different cards, but in this situation, we're going to add 1 to Gift and to Resounding Footfalls. Then, when we gain energy for the turn, because we've already made it this far on the top track, we get to gain 2 energy on each of these cards, and that means that all 3 of them are now fully paid for. We have 2 card plays, so we play Nature's Resilience and Spur naturally, and then we do have a 3rd card play, but that 3rd card play can be only used to impend, so we send Radiating Tremors over here to the queue. And now, here's how we're looking heading into that fast phase. Starting with the simple turn, Ocean plays Visions of Fiery Doom in A3 to drown an Explorer, and then gives Nature's Connection to Many Minds and gains a plant element for themselves. Last, we use Cycles of Time and Tide in F3 to add a Dahan. So Many Minds receives that Nature's Connection and gains 2 animal elements for themselves. Favor is then used in F8 to defend for 4 and push a Blight over into F5. Then Fire in the Sky is used in F1 to strafe an Explorer and stop that land from blighting. Then the Right Innate is used in E3 to defend for 2 before we take that Sacred Site out along with 2 other beasts from E4 and drop everything into E7. Now in E7, Dreadful Tide is used to sack a beast and skip 1 action. Next, let's come on over to Earthquake, who has another massive turn cooking. First, Spur is self-targeted so that Rumblings can be played. Even though this card has reduced value this turn, it's necessary to hit 7 card threshold for the Right Innate as well as the Air for Exaltation. Next, Dances receives 6 energy from River via Boon of Vigor. I wasn't tracking his energy steroids this game, but I guess that puts him at about 12. I think it's the second shot of 6 energy. But anyways, we resolve Exaltation of Incandescent Sky, targeting River. Thanks to that 6 energy boost, we can afford to play Accelerated Rot, and then make Rot as well as the Right Innate become fast. 3 damage is dealt in C6, killing the city. And then we get to skip an action each in E7, 8, C2, C5. I think this card might just be a little OP. Resounding Footfalls skips the Ravage in E6 and adds another Quake token there. And then we use our Innate to add yet 1 more Quake token. Another part of that Innate gives us Defend per Impend, so C6 receives a Defend 2. Meanwhile, Nature's Resilience defends C1 for 6 points. Then we use Rumblings to push Dahan from C5 into both C1 and C6. So now the Right Innate, Earth Shudders, Buildings Fall, gets used in E6. There's only Quake tokens in E6, so this time it's going to be a lot less wide than it was before, but remember, this is a lost condition, so we're very happy to have it dealt with. Accelerated Rot was also made fast, and that is used to completely wipe out F5 and clean up the blight that Flo just put there. Then last but not least, Many Minds gets yet another massive injection of energy with Gift of Seismic Energy, going all the way up to 22. Last but certainly not least, River received that Exaltation, and they used it to play Twilight Fog, as well as make Wash Away and Massive Flooding, both fast instead of slow. That 3 damage portion is used to pick off the city in F4. So first, Washaway is used to bring 3 towns from 7 over here into 8. And then Massive Flooding is used to blow up this land. These cities have 1 health on them, so Flash Floods is used to pick one of those guys off. And then we use Call to Isolation to send these 2 guys down to Davy Jones' locker. Last, Boon of Vigor was given over to dances as previously mentioned. So before seeing the event, we all have to sacrifice a presence for a token. Ocean sacrifices a presence in E5. Many Minds in F1. Dances in C1. And then River in A5. So, here's how things look heading into the Invader phase. Our event for the turn was Terror Brings Aggression. So for every 2 fear cards, we get +1 damage during Ravage. And since we have 4, this is twice as bad as increasing aggression. So that's not good. That's a kick in the nuts. By itself, that's going to produce 9 Blight on this Ravage. So we're definitely going to need those fear cards to help us out. Beasts are going to get added to E5, E5 again, F3, and C4, thanks to some portal shenanigans. And then those beasts are going to kill Dahan in E5, C4, A5, and F3. And then, just as quickly as we thought that extra damage would wreck us, the bottom part of the event solves 5 of that 9 Blight. So that means we will survive the turn. We're only taking 4 Blight with 6 left on the card. But off we go to the Fear deck. We have 4 cards at Terror level 2. Starting off, we get Theological Strife. Strife gets added to F4, E7, and then twice in C2. Next, we get Emigration Accelerates. Invaders are removed from E5, E3, and then twice from C2. So I guess those 2 Strife weren't that important after all. Our third Fear card is a new one called Dahan Gain the Edge. And it gets used in E5, F3, F4, and F6. Last, we get what I think is one of the best Fear cards in the game, Terror level 2, Immigration Slows. So first, we Ravage in the mining lands, and then Ravage in the sands and jungles. Then we Scotland 6 in any land that is still a mining land, as well as sands and jungles. Take note, you cannot Scotland 6 the same land twice. Then we're going to skip this build, but we're still going to Mining Boom in E7, F3, and C5. Then we explore the jungles, and we're going to do a Scotland escalation, which this time goes on to Ocean's board. Towns were added to F1, 4, 6, and 8. And here's how things look going into the slow phase. During the Spirit phase of this turn, we'd considered the possibility of an imminent victory. But now that we've seen the event and fear cards, we're almost certain it's safe to declare victory. Right now, there's just 7 cities on the whole island, and only about 3 fear cards until Terror level 3, just 45 fear. Killing those cities produces 14 fear, or at about a third. So all we have to do is produce an additional 31 fear in 4 spirit action phases. We get this slow, all of turn 7, and then turn 8 fast. So getting that 31 fear should be trivial. Dances has no slow powers, but Many Minds uses Angry Bears in F7, killing City and Explorer, and then pushes a beast over here into land number 8, and then kills a town. River used Twilight Fog to strafe the town in E3, and then push a Dahan into the portal where it would pop out in F6. River's Bounty is then used in C8, bringing in Dahan from F4 and C6. Last, Ocean uses Swallow to drown the town in A3, which brings a Dahan along with it. Then uses Ravaged Undergrowth to do 3 damage over here in F8, picking up both a city and a town because it was previously damaged. A Blight is then removed, and it produces 2 wilds. Those wilds can now be pushed thanks to that threshold, and in the lands that the wilds go into, they get to push out an explorer town. So both of these towns here are going to go into the ocean, since F2 is now part of the ocean. Last, a deeps token is going to be added into E5 and F3. And then we're going to do some damage over here in E5, killing the city. And then we can repeat that damage, or repeat the damage dealing ability in a land where we have presence, which is over here in F4. And so this is how things look heading into turn 7. Everyone is reclaiming this turn, but Dances elected to add presence instead of gain a card on reclaim, so we have 3 cards to consider. Many Minds was planning on spending 2 energy after this to gain a major, so this minor gain is largely just for forget fodder. Of course, we can always find minor ways to improve our hands, so Domesticated Animals goes Berserk, was snap picked, and a major was immediately pulled, which gave us these options. Dissolve Bonds into Kinship was obviously not the pick, but there's compelling arguments for all 3 of these other cards. Indomitable Claim does have the weakest argument for being picked though. Defend 20 is splashy and sexy, but if we consider our position, it's simply not necessary. Additionally, this late into the game, there's no time to derive value from that proliferation. So now the choice is between Solidify and Vigor. Both are great choices, and it really comes down to aggression versus safety. If you're concerned about something going wrong and delaying victory for so long that you lose to having no presence, since we have that Blight card, we get to sacrifice a presence every turn, then Solidify would be the safer choice. But taking a look at the board, River is the closest to having no presence, and he still has 4 in play. At any time, he could even take a G2 to add 2 more presence, so we really weren't scared about that. Therefore, Vigor was the pick. Vigor gives you all the power of a Dahan and defend strategy, with none of the risks such as bad events. So, that's what we picked, Forgetting Favor. Ocean had plenty of energy since we picked the cheaper card last turn, so elected to go for a major again. This turn, there will be no sacred sites, so Paralyzing Fright and Dream would not be playable. Since we're trying to close out the game immediately, it doesn't make sense to gain cards we cannot use. Sweep has better board control but produces less fear. Since we have a plan to deal with the few remaining cities, I feel like the best thing I can do to contribute is to push a Terror level 3, so Terrifying Nightmare was the pick, Forgetting Ravaged Undergrowth. Last, River had a pretty mediocre selection of cards, but this card gain really isn't that consequential. River already has all the cards that they could want, so Haunted by Primal Memories is picked simply because it produces the most fear, and we can always have that backup TL4 victory. So starting with Dances, on the Reclaim adds a presence over here into G3, the Portal Land, but elects to keep it here. By growing across the bottom track, we can now gather a Dahan into one of our lands. So we do so in this Portal Land, and we will send this all the way over to F6. When we gain energy, Radiating Tremors comes into play for free off of Impend. Then, once again, 5 energy is invested into an Exaltation. And then we also are going to put out the Gift of Seismic Energy and the Resounding Footfalls. Ocean is on Reclaim, so presence must be recalled back into their respective oceans. Then we play Call the Deeps, Cycles of Time and Tide, Terrifying Nightmares, oh whoops, that's not the right card, and Tidal Boon. Next, River shakes up their play a little bit, choosing to play Thriving Choke Fungus, Call Isolation, Wash Away, Flash Floods, and River's Bounty. And then last, Many Minds chooses to play Vigor, Angry Bears, Sky Stretches, and Pursue. So let's start with Dances. Dances adds 2 Quake tokens, both right here into the portal land, and so they both get sent over here to E8. Next, Ocean uses Cycles of Time and Tide to add another Dahan over here into F3. And then Call of the Deeps is used on board C just to pick up this Lone Explorer. And then Terrifying Nightmares is used over here in F7 to send both these guys over here into F8. During the Spirit phase, River had sent these 2 Dahan over here into the Portal Land and had both of them pop out over here in F8. So during their turn, they're going to use Flash Floods to kill the town over here in Lumber 3, and then Call to Isolation, now that we have the additional Dahan, to push both of these towns into the drink. Then Many Minds gets to pop off, starting with a Thresholded Vigor, but killing off everything here in F6, and then splitting the Dahan with that Threshold, killing off everything here, and all of a sudden, all of board F is empty. Then, targets himself with Sky Stretches, so that way Angry Bears can be used fast over here in E7. That is going to kill 2 towns, and that's really important because now this is no longer a mining land, so it avoids 2 ravages from happening. With the Threshold, the Sacred Site is now slid over here into land number 4, killing this town as well. Thanks to this Presence movement, now we can use our left innate over here in land number 1. So we're going to pull in our Sacred Site as well as 2 of the beasts from E5. These are all going to get portaled over here into C4. Now that we have all these beasts here, we can use our right innate for defense, but really we're just using it for fear, because immediately thereafter we're going to use Pursue to push all of this stuff into the Portal Land, and then from there it bounces into the ocean. So after all that fast phase was submitted, I was very happy that I was looking at the Discord right when the update popped up, because this happened. Now, I had only played 4 cards this turn because I couldn't find any reason to play any other card. However, since we need exactly 2 Fear to get up to Terror level 3, I feel like that's just the obvious play. And I feel like it's justifiable to play it retroactively. There was no new gained information. I just simply hadn't mathed everything out. Everyone else at the table agreed it was okay, and so that's what we did. After that adjustment, here's how things look heading into the Invader phase. Presence was sacrificed for tokens in C3, F1, and twice in F4. So our event for the turn was the World's Vibrance Fades. So each spirit has to choose between removing a blight from the card or by sacrificing 2 presents. So Many Minds sacrificed their Sacred Site on F4. Ocean sacrificed a presence on boards A and F. Dances sacrificed presents on C4 and C6. And then River removed a blight from the card. So now there's no invaders or spirit presence on board F. It's a nice sanctuary solely for the Dahan. For the beast portion, F1, A7, E8, and C6 were isolated, producing 3 fear. I'm really happy that we got a fear-producing event this turn, since I can imagine retroactively gaining 2 fear with Grasping Tide could be a very controversial decision. And since we would have hit Terror level 3 regardless of my play, I can rest easy knowing that this turn would have played out the exact same way. I would hate for, this run to be mired by any sort of controversy. Last, Dahan is added to E5, F4, and C8. Terror level 3 cards are incredibly powerful and are often game-ending on their own. The first fear card we pulled was Dahan Threaten. This was a pretty easy one, seeing as there's only 4 legal targets on the board, so now all those Dahan lands are clear. Next, we got Dahan Attack. Since now there's no lands that already have Dahan and Invaders together, there's no way to make this one too explosive, but we still got to do some work in A8, C5, C6, and C7. And now, board A is completely clear. And our last fear card for the turn was Too Many Monsters. This was used twice in E8 in order to make this no longer a mining land. And then we also picked up a town in C5 and E7. So now there are no invaders in board C as well. There's only 3 invaders left on the whole island. So nothing ravages, there's no mining lands, and so nothing Scotland 6s. Then we have to build on the coasts and the jungles. Thanks to Scotland 3, these coastal lands do build on board E, so that's unfortunate, but there's no explorers anywhere on the board, so nothing can mining boom. And then the Explore card is going to be Sands Mountains. Since the HME escalation triggers, right, we're in stage 3, it has to match a terrain that is not shown on any card. It is forced to go in the wetlands. And so, here's how things look heading into the slow phase. I think it's pretty obvious the rest of the game should be a cakewalk from here. In the last slow phase of the game, River uses Thriving Choke Fungus over in E8, then uses Wash Away to push F7 into C8, and use Massive Flooding over here for big damage. Then River's Bounty is used in A5 to bring in these Dahan and help repopulate the Dahan. Dances uses his only card in E6 to push Quake tokens into E7, E8, and C8. Then Ocean adds Deep tokens into E1, E5, and then does damage plus repeat over here in E1 to clear that land. Last, uses Tidal Boon on many mines just to pump up this energy number a little more. And here's how things look going into turn 8. For turn 8, we had the game in the bag just with an earthquake, but we found a way to get a completely clear island for absolute domination. Cards should have been gained all around, but the only person who actually looked was River. Just decided to pull a major for fun, and just in time pulled a cast down into the briny deep. So Ocean gets to just chill and watch it all happen, but River starts by sending a Dahan into A2 via the portal, and then uses Call to Isolation to send that town away. Then Flash Floods was used to kill the Explorer here in E6, and Boon of Vigor was eventually used to juice up Dances Up Earthquakes. Many Mines uses Vigor in order to clear E5, and then pushes Dahan into E7 and E4, killing a town and an Explorer. The left innate is then used to bring 3 Dahan into C2 coming from C4, where Angry Bears is used to clear the land thanks to a self-targeted Sky Stretches. The threshold on Angry Bear then lets us move a beast and pick up the Explorer on C5. And now we end finally with one last Earthquake. So Dance is going to use G3 again to add an energy to these 2 cards. They all gain 2 for the turn, so same combo we did last time. So these cards come into play, and we get to add a presence over here to F3. So we get to impend 1 card, Bargains goes up, and we can play 2, so we'll play Spur and Rumblings. Spur is going to self-target, allowing us to play this Nature's Resilience, and then we receive the 6 energy from that from River. So with that 6 energy, we're going to use Exaltation, so we're going to drop Accelerated Rot into play with the same combo we've been doing all game. And then it allows us to do 3 damage at range 0, picking up this town, and we're going to target River so they can pick up this Explorer. Now, this Exaltation also lets us do a slow to fast, so we can do so with our right innate. With our any element, we get to pick up that the Earth, so we get the full right innate. We have 7 cards in play. Of course, we have to use Gift of Seismic Energy one last time. Get Many Minds juiced all the way up to 30 energy over the course of the game. Gotta commit to the game plan. And, well, now, oh yeah, during the Spirit phase, we also slow this guy over, so range 0 targeting. We can blow up these cities and blow up this city as well. And that will give us a completely empty island. Wow, that is GG. A very convincing win at the end. There is no hope for the invaders left here. As game host, Flo always likes to track the fear produced by each spirit. So here's how that looks. It's important to note that fear per player is nothing more than a fun statistic. It's not a serious one. As we saw this game, there were many times where 2 or more spirits were required to work together in combination with each other to execute a particular play. So assigning the fear from said play to any one particular player is a bit of a misnomer, but it was credited to whoever actually produced the fear in the end. It's a fun thing to track though, and it does feel satisfying to see the payoff of investing heavily into Many Minds. Turns out, when you get a free 30 energy over the course of the game, you too can make the most fear. I reached out to the guys for their personal thoughts and comments on the game, and here's what they had to say. So Flo responded first, and he said, I think it was cool to see how Dances shifted their Quake game plan after doing their turn 4 one from a wide earthquake to a tall earthquake. I think the game had a good amount of junctures where the players could have chosen to draft a card for instant gratification over choosing the better long-term play, such as Exaltation of Incandescent Sky over Forest of Living Obsidian, and Sky Stretches over Teeming Rivers. I think for myself as Many Minds, it was worth the gamble to possibly have the team flip the Blight card earlier than expected and lose my presence over getting the guaranteed defend with my innate. So he's referring to the turn where he could have taken Teeming Rivers. If he had taken Teeming Rivers that turn, he would have had a defense innate, but he elected to take Sky Stretches. As we saw this game, it was crucial for getting that final victory, and it was a wager, and it just happened not to pay off. Anyways, back to him. I thought it was cool how River had 2 rivers on the board rather than one long river. I think it's important how Ocean focused on Many Minds Coast after helping clear River's A2 wetlands. I think that Ocean and Many Minds had a great relationship to make things easier for each other until Dances and River ramped up. It was cool as Many Minds to be on opposite sides of the island, having presence in both the E1 sands and the F1 sands, and then eventually going to Dance's board to clear up their board for the last turn of the game after Ocean's board F became empty. Many Minds is an endgame monster, especially when it gets support. And then in parentheses, some people think it's just a fear spirit and not a top 10 spirit. He also added Angry Bears. I didn't think that would be an effective card into a 6/6 because I don't think I've ever used it in a 6/6 and thought its effect is underwhelming for its cost. But it was the right pick and it did do a lot of work. It helped us not lose to the HME loss condition. Then he draws a comparison to Vigor of the Breaking Dawn, where at the same 3 cost, it did significantly more havoc on the board than Angry Bears did. And he adds, Ocean is an underrated support spirit, especially deeps. Ocean not ever needing Bedevil compared to base Ocean helped the team a lot. And he says, I think we crafted a well thought out team going into this matchup. Everyone had their role and executed it. And then last he adds, after 2 PvP 6/6 games, I think I personally prefer PvP for 6/6 than live games. And I definitely agree with him on that last point. I think the PvP format is fantastic. I've never played a live 6/6, but I can definitely see after a while you just get mentally exhausted and then just settle for something suboptimal. So Celentano responded second, and he said, I knew that as Dances I'd have a harder time in the early game, so teamwork was actually a lot to me. You mentioned the thread where we discussed C8 early, and it was a very important moment to the game, even though it happened on turn 1, because the land could very easily transform into a loss condition, but it was good to know that he had a safety net and allowed for an overall more powerful play. Had we put that mining boom in a different land than C8, that would create bigger problems, on multiple places on the board, which would not be ideal. So stacking the invaders into one land made it easier to deal with them. Boon of Vigor was a card I really enjoyed, and it helped me a lot to carry out the loot build I ended up going into. Ocean defending C3 that one time was really huge because, again, my powers were limited to defending only one land, but with teamwork, I was able to stay afloat through that help. Communication felt important when I did the tall quake in Flo's E6. He did the maths for the quake and the damage and then decided to pile more quakes there to solve that land, knowing that I can figure something else out for my board where I moved the quakes from. He said the quake turn was good teamwork in Ryan's F4 because Dances was able to put down the defense and River moved the Dahan in, so it was a great coordinated play. Overall, I think I enjoyed the game most because of the communication and coordination. We covered each other's weaknesses, so referring to Dance's C8 and C3, Ocean's inlands in general, and then the small yet crucial missing pieces of any puzzle, such as Flo, he pushed a Blight from F8 into F5 right before it was the Accelerated Rot was going into this land anyways, so being able to pick up that extra value through that coordination was really nice. As well as Aru constantly moving Dahan around and putting Dahan in places that are getting defended in order to provide incremental value over the course of the whole game. Then he says, when writing these ideas, I came back to Ryan's video where we played France 6. He committed to supporting us without letting that affect him. And as he said, don't try to be the big dog. And this goes without saying, we always need to know what our win condition is. And I believe that some people really discredit playing support, thinking you always have to be a hammer to do anything. And I disagree because I play a lot of Fractured, which is a pure support spirit. And I do get a lot of satisfaction from knowing I helped others. Perhaps even more than if I were to receive support and do the job myself. Aru chimed in last, and he said he was happy with what everyone else had said, and he didn't have anything additional to add, which is fair because, well, they covered a lot. So where do we go from here? After a short break, we're starting up our next 6-6 game. This time we're playing as Sweden leading, England supporting. So we've got Flo over here playing as Many Minds, and Selly is playing as Dances again, but this time I'm playing as Locust Serpent, and Aru is playing as Stranded Shroud. So we've only just started, we haven't even executed turn 1 yet, but I already know it's going to be a fascinating game. These 3 spirits all have abilities that move another spirit's presence. So in broad strokes, we're planning on leveraging these to make the Locust and Karna significantly more mobile to increase the value of any ability repeats. I'm probably not going to do any more play-by-play videos like this series, but if you're interested in keeping tabs on how this game is going, or how on any other PvPs are going, the upload channels are publicly available. We can see that everyone here is able to view the channel, whereas the discussion channels are not. It's only admins that are able to see it and the players. So come check us out. We're on PvP number 9. As we've done a few of these, we've definitely become a lot more organized. As you can see, we've already got 4 sub-threads going, discussing different things that could be significant decisions right out the gate on turn 1. Another cool thing that we've started doing is these little X's and checks. So it's something that Aru started in the last game, where basically you just throw your opening turn out there, the broad shape of what you're planning on doing, but you put an X to mean that this is not definite. And then you start tweaking, discussing your plans with everyone else, and when you finally decided you know what you want to do, you change that X to a check mark, saying that you've locked in. So that's a cool little thing too. Anyways, thank you guys so much for your time and attention. I hope you enjoyed this series, and I'll see you all next time. Cheers!